Modern is the most popular format in Magic the Gathering today, and with cards ranging from 8th edition until present, a ban list keeps the most problematic and powerful cards from rampaging the format. That being said, there is one card that might be the most controversial ban of all time, Splinter Twin. A combo piece of one of the most loved and hated decks of all time, but the question is, did Twin actually deserve a ban in the first place? And more importantly, does it still deserve to be banned today? Now, before we answer these questions, we gotta go a fair bit back to 2015. With the introduction of sets that had tons of modern staples reprinted, like Modern Masters 2015, and with tons of standard players looking for a non-rotating format, Modern boomed more than ever. Modern also featured cards from the past 12 years, making it much more powerful than Standard. It also featured various archetypes like Combo, Control, Tempo, Big Mana, and more. Now, Splinter Twin was one of the most popular and powerful decks of the format, centering around an enchantment called Splinter Twin, surprise surprise, that if attached to a creature, that creature gained the ability to tap and create a copy of the creature that Twin's attached to. Now, there are two creatures, both Deceiver, Exarch, and Pestermite, that had the ability Flash when it enters the battlefield, untap or tap target permanent. And the combo was, if one of these creatures were in play and Twin was on top of them, you could tap the creature to bring it another copy, untap the creature that had Twin on it, and then instant repeat this over and over again for unlimited creatures that all had haste and could kill the opponent instantly. This means that an opponent could have 3 mana on their turn, pass it to the opponent. At the end of their turn, they could flash on one of these pieces, either Pestermite or Exarch, and then untap and win the game with Twin, making it a turn 4 win that came out of nowhere. Now, if you only ever play Standard or Draft or Casual Commander, this might seem completely absurd. And while it's definitely strong at the time, it is important to understand that the power level of Modern is just way higher than a lot of these other formats. Now, before we continue with that discussion, we gotta talk about Twin getting banned. Throughout 2015, Twin had a lot of nice results, including many top 8s and quite a few first place finishes as well, and January 18th, 2016, this was announced. Decks that are this strong can hurt diversity by pushing the decks that defeats it out of competition. In the interest of competitive diversity, Splinter Twin is banned for Modern. Now, alongside it, a combo piece called Summer Bloom was banned that was in the Amulet Titan deck, allowing you to potentially kill people as early as turn 2. And while the Splinter Twin ban was heavily debated and still is today, no one in their right mind rebelled against the Summer Bloom ban. Everyone understood that it was necessary. Now, the reason that Splinter Twin was incredibly controversial when it got banned is, number one, it was an incredibly popular deck. People that played it really loved it, and a big part of that was that you got to play the Splinter Twin shell in a Snapcaster Mage Lightning Bolt shell, which everyone freaking likes a lot, and everyone loves using their Scolding Tarns. In addition to that, while it did have a pretty good win rate among pros at the time, most average players piloting the deck did not actually have that good of a win rate with the deck, and this was also reflected in the fact that this deck didn't have a crazy high pick rate compared to a lot of decks that actually have come after that ended up getting banned. Splinter Twin had the most normal percentage of pick rate, and even in the tournaments referenced, it never exceeded 20% pick rate, and specifically for Pro Tour Fate Reforged, one of the ones that was referenced in the article, it wasn't the most picked deck, nor was it the best performing in the field, although it did take down the tournament. The last and most important reason that people heavily objected to the Twin ban is that they argued that Twin forced interaction, thus slowing down the format and prevented people from just playing solitaire, just completely ignoring the enemy deck and what it's trying to do, and just always trying to race and never interacting. Now, Wizards' primary reason for banning it was that it reduced diversity, making it so any Blue X deck wanted to just play Twin instead. And while there might be an argument to be made there, the reality of it was, after Twin left the format, it's not like Blue X decks just started taking over the format in various colors. In most cases, the decks just didn't see any play. Now, regardless of how you feel about the bans, there are 2 points about Twin that can't be argued. Number one, Twin undoubtedly warped the format. Everyone did play whatever removal they could to stop the combo, because killing an Exarch or Pestermite with Twin on the stack did end up in a 2-for-1, and it stopped you from losing the game on the spot. Now, the removal was terrible at the time, but we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Now, the second thing you can't argue is that it was unfun to lose to the combo. Everyone doesn't really like to lose out of nowhere, and you could hypothetically just lose instantly to a completely empty board. With end of turn Exarch or Pestermite into Splinter Twin, if they caught you with your pants down, you could just lose, and it was not fun. And fun factor is important when deciding if something should be banned, although it shouldn't be the most important factor, and it wasn't even a factor that they referenced. Now, regardless of whether you think Twin deserved or didn't deserve to be banned back then, it was definitely on a very small margin. It wasn't the rampaging domination of things that came later, like Hogak or Eldrazi Temple, that were obvious insta-bans. Still, this doesn't answer the question about unbanning Twin today. So let's split the arguments for and against Twin being unbanned right now in 2023-2024. First off, for the unbanning of Twin, and there's 3 key points that I want to hit on about the arguments for unbanning of Twin, the ones that are constantly being made, and I think the strongest 3. Number 1 is the power of the format today compared to 2016. One look at Modern today and you can see just how strong things have gotten, primarily due to the power of Modern Horizons, a supplemental set straight to Modern legality filled with guaranteed staples. The power level of Modern has rapidly increased in the past few years, and this is especially true for answers or removal. This leads me directly into the interaction of spells back then versus now. In order to interact with Splinter Twin and the Splinter Twin combo, you really wanted efficient removal spells, and that mainly meant 1 mana removal spells, but back then there were only 3. Lightning Bolt, Dismember, and Path to Exile were the only 1 mana removal spells that you actually could play. Bolt in particular was a very powerful card, but it didn't kill Deceiver Exarch, which was a 1/4, making it inconsistent at best and often could just lose to an Exarch into a Twin, even if you had the mana up to kill the actual creature, because it only did 3 damage. Pact to Exile was bad because it does give the enemy pseudo card advantage and ramp them, meaning that if you played a long game against a Snapcaster counterspell deck, you would often just lose to them being able to overwhelm you with tempo. Last up was Dismember, a 1 mana spell technically, but at the cost of 4 life, and up against the deck that played 4 bolts and 4 Snapcasters, good luck eating 4 to the face and then winning in the long game. Needless to say, removal absolutely sucked back then, but what do we have to compare it to now? First off, we have spells like Fatal Push, which can kill consistently both Exarch and Pestermite. Leyline Binding, which could actually be 1 mana. Solitude, which could actually be 0 mana, although it wouldn't be a 2-for-1, it would be a 2-for-2 trade. Spells like Unholy Heat that could kill both for 1 mana, including just making Tasigur look like just a silly creature. And Dispel, which was 1 blue mana counter target instant, which was played a lot to protect the combo back then, wouldn't stop both Binding or Solitude, which is something important to point out. In addition to that, we also have Disruption that is free, like Force of Negation and Force of Vigor, and with Twin being a combo that needs to be on the enemy's turn because it's 1 through attack damage, you could disrupt it for both those spells, although that would be a 2-for-1 in the enemy team's favor, but at least you're not losing. And all around, you can just see how many more removal spells that we have that are actually good and can legitimately 2-for-1 a Twin player. And when we compare it directly to the removal back then, it's crazy that they were actually able to keep Twin in check at all. Now, the next big argument for the unbanning of Twin today is the strength of the format. And this is just the strength of the format today. Modern has gotten a lot stronger than it used to be. There are a lot more hyper-efficient threats, for one, that can win the game on their own. Creatures like Ragavan, Orcish Bowmaster, Crashing Footfalls that can just come out of nowhere and just create a 2-turn clock. Dragon Rage Channeler, that's a very efficient threat. And the list really goes on and on for these hyper-efficient threats that just can kind of close a game out by themselves if combined with disruption or removal instead of trying to jam a combo into your deck that requires you to fill your deck with all these pretty much dead slots or these slots that are just not optimized for power level if we compare it to the power of some of these single card threats that are in the game right now. And the other argument is that there is more consistently fast clocks. I won't say that they're faster clocks because Twin was alive in a world where there were legitimate 2-turn wins with Amulet Titan, but there are more consistent fast clocks with things like Hammer and Amulet Titan, although there are other things that have gotten weaker, which we will talk about in the cons section in a little while. The third thing about the strength of the format is the fact that Legacy sees no Twin play, which is the format filled with higher power than Modern is, and as the format of Modern gets stronger and stronger, the power level difference between Legacy and Modern gets closer and closer. And the idea here is that inevitably, Twin will get weak enough in Modern as Modern gets stronger to be unbanned. It's just, when is that? Is it now? Is it later? But it will happen eventually. I mean, just look at some of the big unbans or the big scary unbans like Jace the Mind Sculptor and Bloodbraid Elf, 2 cards that really didn't see a ton of play and still don't, even though they were heavily feared to be unbanned into the Modern format. Now, the third argument for the unbanning of Twin is that a boogeyman for a format is actually a good thing. And this argument seems kind of strange until you dig a little deeper. And the big premise here is that diversity is not always good for Magic. And no, I'm not talking about any other kind of diversity besides deck diversity. And what I mean here is that too many decks means the meta is unpredictable or random. Imagine you sit down in a tournament and there are 20 decks that could be played, and a good 50% of those decks are decks that you will just automatically lose to because you have such a really bad matchup. It makes the game feel really random because your wins and losses feel like they're dictated by who randomly you decide to sit against, not how well you play. And a boogeyman, a deck that is so strong that everyone needs to prepare for and play around it, especially a deck where the way you beat it is by interacting with it and trying to deny it or kill something. This slows down a lot of the combo decks because they have to play some amount of interaction and makes the format slower and more grindy as a result. This also makes it so that the format options become a lot more slim, and instead of seeing 20 plus decks running around, you might only see 6 or 7 decks, but the actual games themselves are going to be much more interactive and the games are going to be much more skill oriented. Or at least that's the argument that is being made. And the thing about Twin is, even at its best, it only ever killed on turn 4, and that is if the opponent had no interaction at all. And as a result, Twin increased deck interaction and removal interaction, which some people argue is the most important thing for a healthy modern format. Now, even if you're heavily against Twin, I want you to really think about the 3 points that I stated, but let's talk about the 3 reasons why Twin should stay banned, and these are the core arguments or the strongest arguments that I have seen, and I'm going to try to lay them out here for you. Number 1 is that Twin also gets stronger with time. In a world that Twin is unbanned today, Twin gets a ton of tools that they can use for the first time as well. Planeswalkers like Teferi that are very strong in a control shell, but also protect the combo. Efficient creatures like Ragavan that can legitimately speed up your clock and contribute to an uncontested turn 3 win with Twin. Although a removal spell breaks this up, but then there is less removal for the combo as well. Counterspells like Force of Negation, where if you try to flash in a Pestromite to tap down the opponent's land that they're holding up for a 1-mana counterspell to stop your combo, it's still the enemy's turn, so you could hypothetically force that removal spell that they're using on the Might right now, or the Exarch right now, and yeah, they just lose straight up to the combo. There's also other supplemental spells that are super powerful in a Twin shell. Namely, Counterspell is legal now, and it's a very powerful spell, just being able to deal with anything for 2 mana, and Expressive Iteration is my pick for the scariest one. The spell allows you to get a crazy amount of card advantage built into the combo tempo shell, which could get completely out of hand. In addition to all this, Murktide is a deck that is already very powerful in the blue-red colors right now, and you could even incorporate a transformative sideboard because you don't need that many pieces, only about 9 slots in your sideboard to side in the Twin package or side out the Twin package, and that's something to consider because a combo deck could become a tempo deck or a control deck depending on the matchup, and that gives the Twin player a lot of options. The other argument for Twin being too powerful and shouldn't be unbanned is that there were other competitive pieces in other decks that were removed from the competition. Some of the decks that saw quite a bit of play back during Splinter Twin's heyday or limelight was decks like Amulet Titan, Affinity, or Infect. And there were things that were removed from all these decks, making them a lot weaker or just unplayable. These things include, but are not limited to, Mox Opal, Summerbloom, Faithless Looting, Simian Spirit Guide, Gitaxian Probe, and Pod, or Birthing Pod, was a deck that competed with Twin that did get banned a little while before Twin did. Now, the next argument is that Twin is just flat out unfun to play against. And the idea here is that tapping out on turn 3 against a completely open board should never just be insta GG. And the reality of it is, that could just happen. Like, imagine tapping out for a turn 3 Fable of the Mirror Breaker, or maybe it's a Liliana or something along those lines, and then the opponent just goes 3-drop, 4-drop, you're dead out of nowhere, and it just comes out of nowhere. So even if they never have the combo, you're always afraid of just putting your shields down for just a second and then just insta losing out of nowhere. Even decks like Amulet Titan and Hammer that both have fast kills, oftentimes they have trouble doing it from 0 setup, and they have huge tells that it's gonna come, not just completely out of nowhere. Another part of this argument is that Twin is simply too flexible in the way that it plays. it can combo one game, but also beat players in the long grindy one, and it has the capability of doing both. A lot of decks are much more linear, where they're relying on a combo game or a combo game plan that they're trying to replicate over and over again, but Twin has this really strong combo that is quick, but also gets to just grind people out, and with these flash threats, they're not just dead cards. Even if the Twins themselves are, you're only putting 4 dead cards in your deck. There are decks that actually see play today, like Indomitable Creativity and Crashing Footfalls, that try to replicate that combo control aspect, but it feels like Twin would just be a stronger version of these decks that are already seeing play in the current metagame. Next up, there's a direct deferring opinion about having a boogeyman in the format, claiming here that diversity is actually good, not bad. Don't force everyone to interact. Let some decks race, let some decks interact, but don't put something that everyone needs to interact with. And having a lot of different decks that people can play is actually good, not bad, even if the format is random as a result. At the very least, it's not stale. Now, the last argument, and the strongest argument in my opinion for keeping Twin banned, is the let's power down the format, not make it stronger. Because it's obvious that this format is getting stronger and stronger, especially with Modern Horizons rapidly speeding up the format. Power creep is going crazy right now. And it's inevitable that one day Twin will be the right power where it won't even make a splash into Modern. But why speed that up today? Why further increase the power creep that Wizards is already pushing onto the game itself, and let the game amp up in power naturally, and maybe even do things to decrease that power? Modern doesn't need to become Legacy Light so quickly. Why not slow things down instead of speed things up? Basically, the true argument here is best case scenario, it doesn't do anything, which means that it doesn't even matter if it's unbanned at all. But a bad scenario, or even worst case scenario, is that it dramatically increases the power level of Modern, which is something that people are actively trying to fight against, especially when Wizards seems so keen on trying to increase the power level of Modern already. Now, you've heard the for, you've heard the against, and everything in between. But let me give you my personal take on the situation and the ultimate conclusion that we can all think about and reflect upon. Now, before that conclusion, though, I want to talk about my personal take, and this one is not objective. I want to make it clear. Twin was one of the first decks I ever built back when I first got into Modern, and I absolutely love the idea of combo control. A deck that you can pivot a win from nowhere and play the aspects that are favorable to you in any matchup. It was a deck that I always felt like I could win if I played well, but oftentimes I also won even when I didn't play well. Now, after that Twin ban, I settled on combo ultimately, moving away from the control aspects of Modern, and I played decks like Jeskai Ascendancy, Ad Nauseam, Amulet Titan, Lantern Control, but Twin was that one deck that just scratched the itch for me that I never really got back. Now, I will say that I firmly believe that the justification for Twin getting initially banned was loose at best. Twin might have deserved a ban eventually, but it wasn't then or for those reasons at all. That being said, I recognize that Twin is not needed in this current format. It's actually the furthest thing from a safe ban, and with Modern seemingly rotating now faster than ever, I can understand some people wanting some normacy for a while and for things to just settle down. I personally think that Twin would ultimately be weaker than people expect, but without it being unbanned for real, we'll never fully know. Perhaps we could do some type of trial unbanning to see, but it doesn't really seem that realistic. I do think, though, give it a couple more years, at the current pace of this power creep that's going on, Twin will get unbanned, eventually, just in time for it not to be strong enough to see any play at all. Now, I've gave you some facts, some opinions, but I want to pass the question off to you. How do you feel about Twin? How do you feel about Modern? And if you were in charge, what would you ban or unban tomorrow in Modern to make it your dream format? If you enjoyed this type of content and want to see more, consider subscribing and letting me know down below because, yeah, I might not make another video after this, but we'll see. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.